Hey there, I'm Marty Sakata, host of Resilient Alpha. You might know me from the Ivy Family Office Network, almost 3 decades of family offices and big shots collaborating on alternative investments, strategy, and good causes. That's the fuel for this podcast. Why Resilient Alpha? Simple. Why do some funds and managers crush it and others crash? We're cracking that code, redefining alpha, and bringing top brains to unpack asset classes and hot alpha ideas full throttle. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Welcome to another episode of Resilient Alpha. I am your host today, Shelley O'Donovan, and it is my pleasure to be joined with Anna Nekoranec. Anna co-founded Align Private Capital in 2014 with Robert Blavely and a leading Florida-based family to address the ultra-high net worth alternative investment market. Align launched its first family-only fund with $150 million from one LP in 2019. Align is women-owned. It's SEC registered as an investment advisor. It's created an absolute return platform for single-family offices, and it currently manages that on behalf of one family. Align sources all of its transactions from a proprietary network of 100 plus SFOs and industry experts. Prior to Align, Anna spent over 20 years working domestically and internationally with ultra high net worth families on direct investments or working for private equity or venture capital firms, including Investor Growth Capital, the Safeguard International Fund, and CMS companies. Anna also worked at the Brookings Institution and NSAD. She has an MBA from Wharton and a BA from the University of Virginia, and she's the contributing author to the Complete Direct Investing Handbook, a guide for family offices, qualified purchasers, accredited investors, and is co-author of How to Buy a Business, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. She serves on the board of trustees for the Jefferson Scholarship Foundation, and she was the inaugural chair of the first generation of Walenta's Scholarship at the University of Virginia. She served on the board of the Association for Corporate Growth and of Tampa Bay and the Sarasota Memorial Hospital Investment Committee. Anna is a Fortune Most Powerful Women in the World Conference delegate, and she served on a number of nonprofit boards, including 40 Carrots Family Center and the Asolo Repertory Theater. She was also the inaugural speaker at the launch of the Wharton Diversity and Inclusion Speaker Series, Women Leaders in Private Investment. So with that, I just want you to help me welcome Anna today.
The content here is for informational purposes only, should not be taken as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, or be used to evaluate any investment or security, and is not directed at any investors or potential investors in any featured fund or deals on this video.
So I would like to welcome you here today for Resilient Alpha. My name is Shelley O'Donovan. I'm with the Authentic Influence Group, but here today, I'm here as host on behalf of Resilient Alpha. And with me, I have Anna Nekoranec, who is the founder and CEO of Align Private Capital. So it's a firm that she established in 2014, along with Robert Blavely and a prominent Florida-based family office to serve the ultra high net worth alternative investment market. With only over 20 years of experience working with high net worth families, private equity, and venture capital firms, Anna brings a wealth of expertise to her leadership role. She holds an MBA from Wharton and a BA from the University of Virginia and is a recognized thought leader, contributing to publications like the Complete Direct Investing Handbook and serving on various boards, including the Investment Committee for Sarasota Memorial Hospital. Her vision for Align focuses on leveraging a proprietary network of single-family offices to source unique investment opportunities, emphasizing family-to-family transactions and innovative portfolio strategies. So welcome with us here today.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Excellent. So Anna, let's start with the big picture. So How do you see the landscape of private capital investing evolving over the next decade?
I think you're going to see major changes in the way funds are structured. I think to a certain extent, the fund model is broken, and you're starting to see pressure on fees, on liquidity, etc. I also think you're going to start to see families play a larger and larger part in terms of direct investing.
Interesting. So Align emphasizes its proprietary network over 150 single family offices. How will this network give you an edge in the future investment climate?
Yes. So at Align, we believe that a family that has made over $1 billion in a particular industry is probably better at that industry than anyone else. In addition, about 10 years ago, we spotted this trend from families to go to more and more direct investing. And we realized that a family that had made money in a specific vertical had better sourcing capability in that vertical than in other verticals. They also were in a situation where they needed to diversify away from their core industry. So we felt like if we could unite these families together to share transactions, work with each other, share information, and collaborate, then everyone would be better off. Currently, in our fund, we source almost all of our transactions from other families.
So you mentioned that you source other transactions from other families. So I would ask you to speak a little bit to the importance of building those relationships with families, and if you can just expand on how that works for you all.
Certainly. So ours is a referral business. We don't market, and every family we've met's been a referral from someone else. So I spend a large chunk of my time getting to know people and building trust, understanding what a family wants to do, understanding where their expertise is. And we look at ourselves as kind of a dual role, if you will. We can be a provider of capital to the family, or we could be a source of transaction flow to them, and they might partner with us on a transaction.
Interesting. So we've heard you talk before about just this idea of flexibility and asset allocation. And how do you see diversification strategies adapting to future market volatility?
Yes. So when we launched our fund, we spent a lot of time looking at data. The family had a very extensive private portfolio, and we came to the realization that we were having a 100-year storm every 2 years. So we felt like for a family in particular, if you were able to be more flexible in your investment strategy, then you would be able to capture more alpha. So an example, during the period of, you have COVID 1 year, and then a couple of years later, and you have this dramatic rise in interest rates. If you're able to pivot on a strategy, you could take advantage of those market dislocations.
Excellent. And so obviously we see what's happening out there in the world is that technology is really transforming every industry. And so how do you see it reshaping investment sourcing and decision-making at Align?
In terms of investment sourcing, we're becoming more and more efficient with the use of using technology to process and to kind of detail investments. That said, with the proliferation of data, it's becoming more and more complex. The other issue that we've been looking into is trying to use AI and other technology to kind of streamline our processes. However, one of the things that we're most focused on is security. And with the kind of these AI models, it's unclear as to who has that data, where could that data go? And so we've been reluctant to go into it full speed at this point.
Interesting. And so you bring me to my next question, which is about risk management. And so, I know that that's a big focus in your process. And what risks do you anticipate, either with AI or other risks coming forward over the next few years?
So we look at risk in a couple of different ways. So we look at macro risk, and then we look at more micro risk in each portfolio company. And so if I start with the first, these dramatic changes or 100-year storms that I've been talking about, we view them as an opportunity to take advantage of a market dislocation and, generally speaking, get better pricing. So we just did this with Liberation Day. We were looking at an opportunity that happened to be a bankruptcy. There were a lot of bidders. It's a very attractive name that's extremely well known. And the minute we had Liberation Day, a number of the bidders who lacked transparency and had a lot of exposure to China decided to back off. As a result, we were able to gain this opportunity at probably a third of the price we thought we were going to have to pay. So for us, the macro dislocation is about understanding what's happening, understanding the risk of it, and trying to find opportunities. If I look on the micro side, every time we look at an investment, we underwrite the downside first. What does that mean? That means we'll sit in a detailed manner and try to understand if we might be, in the worst case scenario, down 10, down 20, down 50, or lose the whole investment. We will do this before we look at how much money can we make.
Interesting. And so the other thing that I've heard you talk a little bit about before is just the right partner, like finding the right partner. And so can you speak a little bit to how you determine the right partners to work with?
Certainly. So with some of the investments, we're really looking at who can add value to the investment, maybe open doors, have an deep understanding of a particular sector. I'm working on a transaction right now that I think will close in about 2 weeks. They have a really unique technology that enables you to tell if people are lying. Okay. And so there are obvious that you ask 4 questions and they can tell with 97% certainty if somebody's telling a lie. So the applications for this particular company are quite wide, as you might imagine. So they're in the government, they're on the front lines in Afghanistan, they are in the insurance industry, they're starting to get exposure to drug testing. It's all with efficiency because they can decrease costs. In the insurance industry alone, I think it's a 30x ROI. It's quite phenomenal. But as we look at the team, we view the team not just as the management team, but who's on the board and who's in the investor base. So we look for families that have deep knowledge of the defense area, who have deep knowledge of insurance, who have deep knowledge of actually pro teams on the drug testing side. So we then try to assemble this group that could be value added and see if they might be interested in partnering with us on this.
Excellent. Interesting. And so in this rise of ESG and impact investing, how do you all at Align integrate those trends into future strategies? Is that part of your strategy, or is that something you that don't have as part of your strategy?
It's interesting. We've had this kind of unique take on kind of do well by doing right. That's just been central to everything we're doing. For example, we just made an investment in a manufacturer of active pharmaceutical ingredients. This hasn't been done in the US in I don't know how many years. It's the only state-of-the-art facility, and I think it's going to become the poster child for public-private partnership. However, they also have played a major role for children's hospitals because there were 300 pharmaceuticals for pediatrics that were in short supply, and they've redone that supply chain and in partnership with a number of children's hospitals. We think this is kind of it's a phenomenal investment opportunity, but it's also having an immediate impact. And that's what we look for. The other company I mentioned, they're saving lives on the front line. So we love things like that, and almost everything we're doing has that element. We also, having gone through a period of focus on diversity, we really look at diversity of mindset on all of our teams. So we try to approach every opportunity with the view, if we can get different views around the table and get everyone to work together and collaborate, we're all going to be better off.
Yeah, and it sounds like those different views are really helping to push momentum and movement forward. So how do you make those connections, and how are you thinking about, how do I connect different families or different opportunities to those families?
So once a family is in the network, we really try to get to know them quite well and understand what they like, what they're interested in. And we have kind of an open door policy that if you're a friend of a line, you can always call a line and we'll try to be helpful. So we try to connect people with the things that they're interested in.
I love that. So you've worked with these ultra high net worth families for decades. So how do you see their investment priorities shifting in the future?
10 years ago when we launched a line, I realized that families were very interested in doing direct investing and they didn't exactly know how to do it. Some people were doing it really well, and some people were just kind of finding their way. And I've seen this evolve, and I think there's a tremendous amount of momentum, and it's not going to stop. I mean, I think more and more families of size are less interested in fund investing because the funds have not really delivered the liquidity they thought they were going to, and they would rather take control inside. So I think this is going to mean more and more directs coming out of the family office market. In addition, you have a point where I think the global family office AUM is going to go from 3.1 trillion currently to 5.4 trillion by 2030. So that's a lot of capital to invest.
Excellent. And so what role do you see Evergreen structures playing in the future of private capital?
I think once a family gets to know a manager and understand them and trust them, they're less inclined to want to have to re-up all the time in a fund. We saw that happen with us. We started out looking at a 3-year investment horizon and a 6-year to 7-year kind of end of fund life, because we were focused more on shorter duration and more liquidity. But the family, once they got into it and they realized the strategy was working, was really less interested in trying to keep re-upping funds, and they wanted an evergreen vehicle.
Excellent. And so the one question I have for you was, what haven't I asked you today that you think our audience should know?
I think we discussed a little bit about what's happening in public-private, because we can invest in publics also. I think this trend in private investing is just going to accelerate. We have 25 million private companies, and we have 4,000 public companies. So I always like looking at the math and the data and seeing what that's telling me. I think a similar moment that we haven't talked about that we discussed prior was what's happening on the investor landscape, because in the next 20 years, there's going to be this great wealth transfer that's going to take, I think they're estimating it right now at 124 trillion. It's going to move from generation to generation. 100 million of that is going in the hands of women. I think that's going to change the landscape of how investments are done on a go-forward basis. And right now, there's a tremendous mismatch between, you look at most of the funds that are out there and their composition, there's still a dearth of women. And if you look at all of this money going into the hands of women, I think things are bound to change.
Any predictions on how that might shift things, or what different things you're going to see when women are more involved?
I think I've looked at a number of opportunities, including this bankruptcy, where it's an entity or business that's targeting the women's market. And there are a lot of guys calling shots without a lot of women around it. and it hasn't ended well. So certainly I think that's one area. I think this emphasis that I mentioned, like I'm looking at active pharmaceutical ingredients. I don't think most people understand that there's a large percentage of the pharmaceuticals that we take that haven't been tested for quality. And so they're actually not working. I think women are more concerned about, well, what is the impact on my family? Is this being done the right way? Is this safe, et cetera? So I think that's going to cause a tilt.
It makes sense. And I've worked in pharma a long time previously, and I know that just in general, drugs aren't always tested on women. So I think that's going to shift things as well, right? That's going to shift the market.
Agreed.
So my final question here for you is if you have any bold prediction for the future of investing, say by 2035.
But I don't know that it's bold. I do think you need to look at a few different factors. I think you need to look at what's going to happen as women take over this money, because I do think things are going to change. I think you also are going to want to take a hard look at Gen Z, because you've got around 70 million boomers and you have a cohort Gen Z of similar size. And by 2035, they're really going to be making an impact on what's happening. 95% of them have cell phones. They are the most tech savvy generation of all. And I think a lot of things that we accept, they're just not going to accept. They're not going to understand why I can't buy everything just through my phone, or why are we carrying paper money, or in terms of, I just went through an insurance claim. Why is it done this way? Like, this should be an app, like FEMA should be an app on our phones that we have a few qualifications on, not a 6-month process with lots of paperwork. So I think they're going to cause tremendous changes in terms of what's happening. They're also one of the most diverse groups of individuals out there. So I think that's also going to change the investment landscape.
So now we're going to move into the lightning round. All right, so as we move into the lightning round, I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. So first, public equity or private equity, which will dominate the next decade?
I think the numbers tell it all. With 25 million private companies and 4,000 public companies, it's private.
And what's the one sector you're most excited about for future growth?
Okay, I'm going to cheat on this one because I'm going to say 2. Security. I love security. And I would also say tech-enabled pharmaceutical manufacturing. I mean, I think the industry, with this onshoring trend, the industry is ripe for a complete redo.
Digital assets, hype, or here to stay?
Here to stay.
What's the biggest threat to investors in the next 5 years?
I think it's the volume of information. And I also think it's knowing whether or not the information is true and accurate.
So one word answer here. What's the future of fund fees?
Decreasing.
Will AI replace human investment managers?
I don't think so. I think what's going to happen with AI is that it's going to be leveraged. It's going to make things more efficient for managers, but I don't see it replacing a manager.
So what's the next big theme after ESG?
Well, I think there are 2 that I focus on, and one of those is women. With the great wealth transfer, it's inevitable. The data doesn't lie. And I also think the other is Gen Z. They're purchasing in a different way. They're getting information in a different way. They, they've grown up with the rise of influencers. We're going to see a new world as they take control.
And so more regulation or less in the next decade?
I think it's going to depend on the political arena, but right now it looks like less.
And where will Align be in 10 years?
I hope to be Align is going to be the premier partner for family offices and direct investing.
What's the one thing investors should do now to prepare for the future?
I think you need to start focusing on diversity of thought. I mean, I think group mindset, groupthink has been a problem of the past and has gotten us into a lot of trouble. And if we look to the future, we're going to have one of the most diverse societies ever. And so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have a lot of people that have a similar background or look alike making decisions when they're facing a consumer and a world that is incredibly diverse. I mean, at Align, our team, one is from South Africa, one is from Germany, one is from the Northeast, and I'm from backwoods West Virginia. So I think there's a lot of diversity in the way we think, and I think we're all better off listening to each other.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed your thoughts today, and I want to thank you on behalf of Resilient Alpha, and thank you for taking the time today to speak to us.
It has been such a pleasure to spend the morning with you. Thank you.